The Cyberhero exam is really a chance to shine and know that you know how to use ThreatLocker as a whole. So during this exam, people are going through different scenarios where they need to help somebody figure out how to solve their issue. So it's more about knowing how to use the product versus just knowing general knowledge. So really, I just hope that they take away these skills and are able to implement it when they get back home.
My company is all in with ThreatLocker. We think it's an important part of our cybersecurity stack, and the only way we're going to do it is if I mandate that everybody gets certified in the company. I had to put my money where my mouth is and get it first. I've taken it twice. I took it the first time on Wednesday, took it again yesterday, passed it. The first day I missed it by one question, so it was nice to get over that hump.
The best thing about Zero Trust World is getting that Cyberhero certification. You know, the worst thing is all the people that get to miss the fun in the bar because they didn't study before they came. So it really was. So every year, for those who have joined us for the first time, we do an annual cybersecurity conference in Orlando, Florida. It's in February 26th to 28th this year, Zero Trust World. And we, during that time, we teach people how to hack, how to use rubber duckies, how to use Metasploit, how to secure things, how to harden their server, what they should be doing in their environment. It's a really good 3 educational days. But one of the benefits of it is if you take the ThreatLocker cybersecurity certification and you pass on site, you get a refund of your ticket. Now,
makes the boss happy.
Makes the boss happy. The downside is you actually have to study for it, because a lot of people who come in and use ThreatLocker assume that I know ThreatLocker inside out. I use it every day, but they don't use all of the modules. They don't use all of the components. So they end up failing the first time, and then they take it again, and they end up spending their evening studying. And we have a cool after party. Last year we had a Back to the Future theme, and this year I'm not going to disclose. It's going to be pretty cool though. So hopefully, if you are there, try and do the ThreatLocker University before you leave, so you're better to pass ahead of time. Anyway, good morning, Rob.
Morning, Danny.
So afternoon, if for everyone who's across the pond in the UK, Ireland, or Europe, and no idea what time it is for those who are dialing in and connecting from Australia, maybe evening, maybe a morning. So we want to talk about the holiday times, vacation times, long weekends, bank holidays, public holidays, whatever you call it, wherever you are in the world. Hackers love long weekends because the best way to get paid is to do enough damage that it warrants getting paid. Because if you connect someone's machine and you encrypt a few files on a laptop, the probability of getting paid is very small. But if you manage to get the whole network, then you're more likely to get paid. You get paid. And we saw this, actually, I think we actually saw an epic failure on this from a hacker's point of view on July 4th weekend in 2021. So there was a vulnerability in the Kaseya RMM, and the attackers very, very well coordinated. They got a list of all of the RMMs that were running Kaseya. They were scanning the internet, checking for open ports, and they cataloged them all. So rather than finding an RMM, pushing out ransomware through it, they cataloged them all together. And then what was supposed to be just before the long weekend, the 4th of July weekend, they started exploiting them all and pushing out ransomware to business after business. And they caused massive amounts of data damage. However, they probably should have waited if they wanted to be more successful 4 or 5 hours later, because they did it on the Friday, assuming that most people were starting to go home. And all the bad things that people can say about Kaseya because the attack happened, Kaseya did respond really, really quick. And they did call all their customers and tell them to shut down their servers as fast as possible. So they did respond, and the amount of damage that was done was actually massively reduced because they started about 5 hours earlier. And now if they waited until 5 p.m. on Friday, the response...
A whole different situation.
The whole different situation. However, attackers love to work at the weekends. They love to get your data at the weekends because they can encrypt more files. Less people are likely to notice. No one's going to break the glass, pull the network cable. They can just cause a lot more damage. So what we're going to do today is not tell you how to secure your entire cybersecurity stack, because that would take more than 45 minutes on a webinar, but to tell you what you can be doing before you go away to reduce your chances of an attack. So Rob, do you want to start off with anything before we begin?
Checking for remote access tools within your environments, I think, is a really good place to start. I'm going to tell a very brief story. We have a partner who's used ThreatLocker for incident response, and they were helping out with a hospital, very large hospital that got hit. Deployed ThreatLocker, basically secured everything pretty much straight away to enable the organization to get back up and at least functional as soon as possible. But one of the interesting things was I was reviewing the logs. The guy was literally showing me the anatomy of the attack, what had happened. And one of the techs in the hospital had got his account phished. So basically his credentials were phished, got into his email, reset their, I don't know if I should mention the other tool they were using, but it was an EDR tool they were using. And he showed me the logs from that tool. The first policy that they'd amended, the first thing that they basically allowed was BombGuard, the remote access tool. So that was very much indicative to me that that was what they were using for persistent access. That was what they were using to get in. And I mean, BombGuard is not malware. BombGuard is not bad software per se, but these guys have obviously used BombGuard as a way of getting back into the machines. So removing or finding, first of all, and removing any unneeded or unwanted remote access tools is a really good place to start.
One or two ways you can do that. If you don't have ThreatLocker, you go through the machines, you check what's on there, you can probably run scripts, check if you've got GoToAssist, BombGuard, TeamViewer. Users love TeamViewer. All of these, anything can get in. If you've got ThreatLocker, you can actually just go in, even if you're in monitor mode. And if you want to deploy ThreatLocker before you go away on a trial just to see what's running, you can go in, you can see what's there, you can block it from ThreatLocker very easily. You can turn off the policy if you're in secure mode. If you're in monitor mode, you can turn the policy to deny very, very easily. So it is important because think about this. If you're an attacker, you need to get on someone's network. And if you can find an open TeamViewer code, I mean, we saw that water company get breached using TeamViewer.
Which was described as a sophisticated attack. Now, it was no more sophisticated than somebody getting logged in via TeamViewer.
Most attacks are described as sophisticated when they're really basic, lack of cyber hygiene. But
the problem with something like TeamViewer is, I mean, if it's unmanaged, if it's something that the IT department doesn't manage, then who's to know what the user's done? Have they set up unattended access? Have they logged in with their own? Because TeamViewer asks you to log in once you open TeamViewer. So maybe they go, okay, I better log in with something. So I'm going to log in with my personal email address. Who's to say they don't use the same password on that TeamViewer as they've used on 15 other websites? And one of those 15 other websites get compromised, and all of a sudden they're into TeamViewer and into your network. So that's the danger with unmanaged remote access tools. So look for them, find them, uninstall them, or if you're using ThreatLocker, block them.
Next thing is talking about remote access. And this seems really, really basic. And I know probably 95% of people on this webinar are 100% confident that this is not the case in their environment. However, 100% confidence is sometimes wrong. Do a port scan, check for 3389 open, because a lot of, if you're an IT guy, you don't know this previous IT guy, someone opened something temporarily, they forgot about it. If you're a managed IT company, you have previous MSPs, and it's not just on your own, the server firewalls, but also on home firewalls, where people have taken their laptops home and mapped their home firewall to port 3389. Make sure you don't have any remote desktop ports open. So do a port scan of your customers' IP addresses before you go home, or your servers if you're internal IT, and check there's nothing responding that you don't expect to be responding. If you've got 3389 or 3390, because remember, sometimes people rename that port number as well, or a port open that you do not expect to be open, shut it down. And shut it down, keep it shut down, hopefully, as well. But it's really, really important you do shut that down. Now, if you do host remote desktop services on the web, and I know some people need to do that, first of all, I recommend you use a remote gateway. RD gateway is very, very easy to set up. You can put dual factor on it. But even then, if you're going home for Thanksgiving weekend and none of your users are going to work, just shut it down.
Shut it down, absolutely.
Before you turn the lights out, say, okay, let me shut this down. It's going to help me make sure and sleep better and drink more and eat more turkey over Thanksgiving weekend.
I have an example of that. So I was working with a partner who had about 70 servers deployed in a data center. So it was like their private cloud for all intents and purposes. And we deployed ThreatLocker. We turned on network control for a week. So basically at the end of that week, I said to the guy, look, how many of your servers do you think have had incoming ODP connections? He said to me with unreasonable certainty, 2. So 2 of those machines will have incoming RDP connections. We searched through the audit, 17. He'd misconfigured a firewall, but he had no idea he'd misconfigured that firewall until he had visibility over what was going on connection-wise. So yeah, even if you think you have it set up properly, check and make sure you have it set up properly, because that was just a firewall misconfiguration that exposed 17 servers to the internet. One other fun fact or fun story on this subject, Danny. Partner approached me a while ago and they told me a story. So it was an MSP. they were handing over control of an environment. So one of their customers to a new MSP. So call them MSP and MSPB. Now, I will say ThreatLocker was turned on blocking things when they did this, but they handed over control. First thing the new MSP did, turned on or opened port 3389 to the internet to a server. How long do you think it took that server to get compromised from that port being opened to the server being compromised?
5 minutes.
Well, not quite. 6 hours.
6 hours.
So basically they got in, and the funny part of the story is they got in, they basically tried to run ransomware. Ransomware got blocked because we block everything. What they did was they sent a request through to the first MSP. So the MSPA got a request through, can I run this? Ransomware. So a case in point of don't open port 3389 ever if you can avoid it, and just make sure it's not.
I'll give you one other use case. I was on the phone to a rather large MSP with hundreds of thousands of endpoints. They'd come into support, where they're on trial with our allow listing. They'd come in to support with a ticket saying that we want to see the rootkit that's running in our environment, because EDR had said there was a rootkit running in their environment and it was talking to Russia. We were just using allow listing. There was no network controls in place. They were in monitor mode, so nothing was going to be blocked. But there was no rootkit running, because even when you're in monitor mode, you can see what's happening. So I got on the phone with the customer to say, can you show me this rootkit? Why do you think you got a rootkit? And they showed me this alert. And it didn't say there was a rootkit. There was some ambiguous talk about communications with Russia, and it was very ambiguous. So we opened up the Windows event log, and there was 10,000 invalid logins on RDP from a Russian IP address. Now, no one had logged into the machine. There was no disaster happened. However, they didn't have, I said to them, you've got RDP open. They said, we don't have RDP open. So I'm like, okay, now I'm telling this big prospect we're wrong. And I jumped on, I shared my screen, I opened remote desktop client, and I pumped in their IP address, and immediately I got a login prompt. And the reason, what happened is the IT guy, and yes, this is a big shock that IT people do things wrong as well, had opened up port 3389 on his home firewall and mapped it to his work computer so he could access his work computer, which was running ConnectWise Automate Administration Client with hundreds of thousands of endpoints under management. And that they're essentially one password away from hundreds of thousands of endpoints being encrypted. So don't just think about servers, but think about endpoints as well. Tech guys can be bad as well. If you're not using ThreatLocker, just do port scans. Do port scans of all your known IP addresses, your customer's IP address. If you are using ThreatLocker, make sure you go into network control and you shut down any untrusted ports. If you haven't deployed it and you don't have time to deploy it, it shouldn't take long. I mean, we're still 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, 3 weeks away from Thanksgiving. So get on with your solution engineer, and he will or she will show you how you can do a simulation. You can see what ports are in use, and you can lock down with ThreatLocker Network Control on 3389. If you don't have time because you leave it till the last minute, just go in and at least block 3389, because it decreases your probabilities. And even if you're doing it for that weekend and then you're doing cleanup afterwards, that's better than nothing.
Amazingly, I think pushing 20% of ransomware attacks still happen through port 3389. One thing you did mention there, Danny, that is also important is checking event log on things like servers is very good practice, and it's something you should do from time to time, because in that particular case, what showed in the event log was failed logons from Russia. Just review event logs on servers, see if there's anything peculiar. Even if you don't have network control, if you don't have any way of seeing what's happening networking wise, you may see things like failed logons on servers, which are indicators of compromise or something that you need
Potential
to
compromise.
Potential compromise. Thank you. So yeah, just do review event logs on important machines like servers.
So 3 things we want to do before we go home so far. We want to check there's no unintended remote access tools on your machine. We want to make sure that there's no 3389 or any ports open on your firewall you don't know about. And while we're doing this, we catalog the ports that are open, and we want to shut them down if where possible, especially 3389. And we want to check the Windows event logs. Next thing is check your domain admin accounts. Go into the group in Active Directory, see what domain admin accounts, make sure you know who they are and you know what they are. If they're not there, make sure you remove them. If there's a random account just being created, it means there's already someone on your network. So start really getting scared and pulling alarms and breaking glass. But even if there's old ones that weren't there, remove them and get your guys to reset their passwords. If they have weak passwords, if they haven't changed them in a while, change your domain admin passwords before you go away for the weekend. I was in session the other day, like a lunch and learn or a group session, and I asked one of the questions, well, do you ever put your passwords in your user's computer? So if a user wants to run something, the first question I asked was, are you a local administrator? And they said, my users are not local admins. And the next question was, how do you install software? And they said, well, we put our password in. We go in, we put our domain admin password in. Well, think about this. If that computer has a keylogger on it, that domain admin password is now being compromised. So you should always change it after entering in the user's computers, or use ThreatLocker Elevation to assist with that, or change it afterwards. And if you do put your password in, if you have, it could be exposed out there. So just changing it before the weekend to a randomly generated password, or at least a secure password that you've not used elsewhere, means the probability of it being found on the web is much, much smaller.
Fun fact, you can keylog with PowerShell.
I'm not sure fun, but scary is maybe
either or.
Halloween was yesterday.
You can keylog with PowerShell. So, I mean, you don't even need to run a keylogger to keylog. And obviously, you don't need to download a PS1 file. You can run a PowerShell script remotely, IEX. So
it's a great way of stealing passwords.
It is a very good way of stealing passwords.
So now you've got a list of all your open ports. Make sure they're all patched. I mean, I'm not asking you to take the full patch management course before your holiday weekend, but just check the open ports. I'm running Exchange. Did I install the latest Exchange patches? I'm running MoveIt. I'm running IIS. I'm running a VPN. And yes, VPNs can be exploited. They're not this really, really secure system that can't be broken, because they are susceptible to vulnerabilities just like everything else. So make sure everything that's got an open port, well, look, everything should be patched anyway, but everything that's got an open port with utmost of priority, make sure it's patched before you go away for the weekend. And if not, shut it down. Just shut it. I mean, and that's shutting a server down that's not being used isn't going to break your business, but it might save your ass.
To be honest, that applies to all computers, all machines. It's not just, yes, it is servers, obviously, but basically anything that's not in use over a holiday period, shut it down.
You know, we're thinking about what can IT do here, but it's also about what can users do. Now, what can you tell your users to do before they go home for the weekend? Tell them to shut down their machines. If their machine is not on, it can't be exploited. There can't be a remote access tool on it. There can't be 3389 open. There can't be a reverse shell on it. If it's not on, it can't be used in your environment. Simple. So there's a power button, Windows, start, shut down, boom, use it. Disconnect your laptop. Guess what? You're going home for the weekend. You're not planning on working. Turn off your computer. It's lights out check. If it doesn't, and look, I'm a bit of a paranoid nut, I accept, but I also did years of ethical hacking, so I know how easy it is to fall victim. When I used to work from home, because I'd work, the thing is, when you work from home, you never actually leave your desk. And when you do leave your desk, go, okay, it's bedtime. I've had my dinner here. I'm going straight to bed. I used to not use the Wi-Fi. I would physically disconnect my Ethernet cable from my computer every day before I went to bed. Just because, hey, if it's disconnected, it can't do anything. And it's not a bad practice.
That's the easiest thing for anyone to do coming up to a holiday weekend. Just make sure everything gets shut down. I mean, we're obviously giving general advice and other best practices and everything else, but just shut everything down. Yeah, it's called reducing the attack surface. So if you got 1,000 machines and there's only 100 of them turned on, that's a much smaller attack surface than there is otherwise. So
and servers can be the same. If you've got old servers that you very rarely use, you've got a server that controls the overtime on air conditioning that is running Windows XP or Windows Server 2003, and you can't patch it, just shut it down. Like, if it's not being used, shut it down. If you need to run it once a month, just turn it on once a month. It can really help reduce your surface area. Next one, Rob, you want to take it?
I just realized I wrote notes on this, and one of the notes I wrote was shut down computers. I shut down. Sorry. So yeah, apart from shutting down computers, I mean, basically multi-factor authentication as much as possible, all the things as you mentioned, RDP, remote desktop gateway, MFA is essential. If you don't have MFA on things and you can set up an MFA on things, do. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit of an undertaking, various different ports and services and everything else, but the more you've got MFA, the better. So
somebody's asked a question. I'm going to answer some questions now. Actually, on the MFA stuff, you're not going to be able to get everything on in one day, because MFA should be on every application, but certainly focus on your admin, your privileged accounts, things like that. If you can go in Office 365, make sure you can go in and do those. Someone's asked the question, are we planning on providing remote sessions through ThreatLocker in the future? The answer is no. We are not a remote RMM. We will, however, have some remediation tools built into ThreatLocker Ops in the future, where you can remediate attacks, but they will be limited to the attack or indicator of compromise. So for example, if we say, hey, we recommend you remove this software, there will be some ability to remove that software, but they'll be specific to those things. But we're not an RMM, we're an endpoint security tool. And I think there's too many remote access tools out there as there is. We certainly don't want to add more to the equation. I'm going to answer another question. Does Config Manager have alerts for port scans? Config Manager does not. However, ThreatLocker Ops in combination with network control, you can do alerts with for port scans. So if you do have someone hit multiple ports, you can configure that and you can alert on it in ThreatLocker Ops, unless you know something about a Config Manager that I don't.
No, well, not only port scans, but also fail logons. Probably the first and easiest policy to set up on ThreatLocker Ops is if there's been more than 10 fail logons on a machine, tell me.
Send an alert or enable a policy to shut down all ports. You can do both. And if you want to be more aggressive at holiday weekend when people aren't working, I think that's okay. What are the potential security and operational risks for endpoints if ThreatLocker, which controls almost everything, has full admin rights, were to experience a supply chain attack and become compromised? Well, first of all, everything that runs on the system has full admin rights. So ThreatLocker, I think this goes back to my previous answer as well. ThreatLocker, RMM, group policy, your printer service, your spool service, remote access tools, all of them have full admin rights. So obviously, the first thing is, what do we do as a vendor? So we need to make sure that we can't be compromised as a vendor. And I can't get into every single thing we do now, but you want to make sure that your vendor is implementing all of the security controls and all of the checks and balances in place. The second thing is, what can we do? That is the important point. And that comes back to, why do we want to be a remote access tool? Because I'm more confident in our security than any other security player out there. I'm more confident. And of course, I would say that, but I genuinely am. I'm more confident than an RMMs, but it also keeps me up at night every single night. And that's probably why I'm more confident, because we do so many third-party validation and checks on everything we do. But if ThreatLocker was to become compromised, we cannot run software on your computer. We cannot get remote sessions to your machine. We cannot upload your files. And that's the difference between an RMM and an endpoint protection tool. Our tool does exactly what it needs to do, which is to block software. So if someone was to gain, and let's just say not gain access to ThreatLocker through a supply chain, but let's just say, for argument's sake, someone was to gain access to your ThreatLocker account. You leaked your ThreatLocker password. You didn't have dual factor on it. And someone was to get into the portal. What can they do in your environment? Well, guess what? They can block everything, but you can then go in and unblock it. But we've had people do that by mistake, not through someone gaining access to someone's account. They can allow software to run, but they can't run software. So it doesn't give them access to your account. It just gives them the access to do things to your computer. It just gives them the access to permit or deny things on your machine. They would then have to have another program gain access to your computer, which is why I'm not a big fan of single sign-on between your RMM and ThreatLocker, because if they get into your RMM and now they can go, okay, I'm going to push out some malware, ThreatLocker blocked it. Oh, I'm also signed into ThreatLocker because we're using single sign-on. So one of the things I don't like is single sign-on with, single sign-on generally is a good security feature, but I don't like it in the case of your security, your check and balance. We want to talk about recovery. Check your backups. We don't want you to get hit. We want to make sure, ideally you should be doing everything in ThreatLocker. You should be blocking untrusted software. You should have your ports closed down, and then you're not getting hit. But let's just assume for a moment that something really bad happens. Make sure you have a backup before you go home.
Not a backup, many backups.
Many backups.
Many backups.
And one of them preferably disconnected from your network.
Absolutely. Put it on a disk, bring it home with you. Encrypted disk, obviously.
Yes. If you have an offsite backup, the probability of you being able to recover just drastically increases. And here's one thing I want you to check in your backups. One of the things that ransomware attackers are doing is they're changing your backup configurations to back up a big empty file. So every day you get a backup saying 2.4 gigabytes transferred. Success, thumbs up. What you don't realize is they got onto your machine, they got onto your backups, they changed your backup so it's not backing up the actual data. So check your backups, do a small restore. You don't have to restore your whole environment, but pick some sample files before you go home at the weekend and make sure they're there and that you're not backing up nothing, because that is happening more and more where people back up nothing.
Small side note, make sure your backups are going to where you expect your backups to go to.
Yes. And one of them
very easy way to exfiltrate large amounts of data from any organization is using online backup.
Yes, because you can use Veeam to back up someone else's Veeam server. And that
Exactly.
doesn't, or a Cronus or any kind of cloud backup to back up someone else's code.
Tool. I mean, it's no egress alarm for your backup doing what your backup normally does. So yeah, just make sure it's going where it's supposed to be going.
Someone's asked a question, do we have SOC SAS A16 we can provide to clients? Yes, we have a SOC 2 Type 2 we can provide to clients, but we require you to sign an NDA. Another question is, what is the best way to try and minimize RMM access? So for those who don't know, in enterprise IT here, RMM is a remote management tool used for MSPs, essentially the MSP version of SCCM or BigFix or something along those lines. And it allows you to push out software. It allows you to create accounts. It allows you remote access to machines. It basically gives you God access to all of your clients in one button. First thing you can do is, if you're using ThreatLocker, make sure you're blocking untrusted software. So even if someone gets into your RMM and pushes out untrusted software, they won't be able to run it. But even if you're not using ThreatLocker, allow listing, stopping untrusted software, regardless of its source, is really, really important. If you are using allow listing, don't create a rule to say my RMM can do whatever it wants. I know it's very, very convenient because you like your RMM, but just go through the step. Checks and balances are really important. If I want to push out new software, let me approve it in ThreatLocker. It's an extra 2 minutes in my step. And then at least I know it's not going to be able to eat all of my files, whatever gets pushed out. So make sure you've got your endpoints hardened. Ring fence your RMM. We're talking about the agent and the server here. So I'm going to talk about the agent first. Limit what it can do. So if someone goes onto your RMM and starts uploading files, it can't do that. Limit the files it can access. Limit the internet sites it can go to, so it can't go out to anywhere on the internet. That will harden your RMM client. On the server, now this is not a bad idea. I had a customer call me last year or the year before, and they wanted to take their RMM server off the internet for public holiday weekend. And since then, it's remained off the internet. So what they did is they set a policy up to block. So RMMs have a server, they have a client. The server typically listens on port 443 HTTPS, and the client checks in and gets instructions. The problem is that client, that R443 can be accessed by anyone in the world. So if you have a vulnerability in it and someone gains access to it, they could potentially exploit it and then insert something into SQL to push out malware to all of your clients. So if you have your own RMM server, you can do more, because you can now say, well, I'm in control of the security. So one thing you can do, if you don't have any security and you're not planning on doing any patch management that weekend, shut it down. If you're not using it to monitor for alerts and no one's looking at the alerts, shut it down. Now, a lot of MSPs are 24/7 and should be looking at alerts, but if you're not, if you're literally 200 users and you're going home and you're not going to look at that RMM all weekend, turn off the server or block all ports on it. Your clients won't be able to check in, but you open the ports on Monday morning, everyone can check in. But one of the other things you can do with ThreatLocker Network Control is you can say only a block 443 except for my clients. And you can tell it to track all of your clients' IP addresses dynamically, so when they go home, they can still check in. We've got one MSP that uses ConnectWise Automate, did that, literally shut down all ports apart from their global group, which is all of their clients, and the port's closed unless you're one of their customers. So if there is a vulnerability, it can't be exploited. Also, of course, make sure your RMM's patched. Read the emails that come out from your RMM provider. Make sure it's patched. Make sure it's up to date. Okay, what have we got next on the list? NAT policy on RMM servers, we already did. Of course, if you can't turn on network control, block high-risk ports. Network control allows you to block all ports. That's the best way of doing it. And before you go away, check your ThreatLocker denies. We had a customer, had RDP open on the internet, came into support, an attacker had requested access to Mimikatz. So Mimikatz, really bad tool, don't want to run it. And the attacker had logged onto their server 3 days before, and they'd been on their server trying to run advanced IP scanner, ports, various port scanners, ransomware, and lots of other tools for 3 days. And the customer also had an EDR. The EDR was disabled, and they didn't use ThreatLocker Ops. This was actually pre-ThreatLocker Ops, so they weren't getting any alerts from ThreatLocker about, hey, suspicious behavior is happening, and they had RDP, so no network control, just allow listing. So this attacker keeps trying to run things. And the way the customer found out the attacker was trying to run something was because they requested access to Mimikatz. And the MSP got an alert saying, someone's trying to run Mimikatz on your server. And the MSP didn't know what Mimikatz was, so came into us to say, what's this? And we said, it's really bad. Now, there was no harm because they weren't able to run anything. But the fact they were trying to run things for 3 days and they didn't know was a big problem. Now, if you use ThreatLocker Ops and they're trying to run bad things, we're going to let you know. But before you go away for the weekend, and you can do just server groups as well, go into ThreatLocker, say, show me all denies, and you can filter by the group as well. I think the default policy *server*, show me all the denies on all of my servers. And if there's anything suspicious on there, someone may already be on your server planning your attack. So just check for the denies before you go away for the weekend as well.
Back to network control for 1 second, Danny. Well, obviously, if you don't have network control turned on, do. If you do have it turned on, default deny policies. Create a default deny policies, even if it's just for your workstations group. I mean, do it for servers as well, ideally, but even just for the workstations group. Block incoming connections. I mean, it's workstations default deny, as far as I'm concerned, it's the no-brainer of no-brainer network policies, because why does anything need to connect inwards to your workstations? It doesn't.
Blocked, you can make that exception and you can use the object. So you can say, I'm going to allow inbound connections from my IT computers. I'm going to allow inbound connections from my servers. Shouldn't need to, but if you did, you can make those exceptions very easily and they're logged centrally in one central log.
That's an interesting one. Gene has just said we use a scheduled firewall policy that blocks our RMM each night off hours, turns back on automatically in the AM. If we need to provide support off hours, we enable the policy and then turn it back off. Relatively simple, but extra step off hours, but effective.
Again, if it's not on, it can't be hacked. Someone's got asked the question, does ThreatLocker have the same capabilities as macOS as it does on Windows? Mostly, and more are coming. So we have various, like the allow listing, the storage policies are all the same. The ring fencing is limited, although increasing, and the network control has some, but not all of the policies in Windows, and more of them are coming. I'm trying to answer as many of these. If we don't answer your questions, it's not because we don't like you, I promise. It's because there's a lot in here. So
that's actually a good question from oh God, it's gone. I asked, how does ThreatLocker's network control enhance our existing internal firewall and network security measures in terms of management and administration? Specifically, can it simplify policy management across different platforms and improve overall network security? What are the key benefits and considerations in this regard?
Okay, so there's two areas. One is when we talk about the LAN, because people often think, oh, the LAN's a safe place. It's not, I promise you, it's not a safe place. There's too many devices coming on. It's too flat. You've got machines, people's laptops come in, phones come in, watches, cameras. All of this are potentially entry points into your network. And all of them are getting their IP address from the same place, which is your DHCP server. So you can't turn on a Windows firewall on your servers because you don't, because you're going to say I'm going to allow from the whole LAN, which is still better than allowing from the whole world. With ThreatLocker's network control, we allow you to put a firewall on the server. We log all inbound and outbound traffic. But what we also do is we allow you to configure it to only allow trusted objects, which you mean you can say this group of computers can connect to my server. The ports are closed for everyone else. And if another group tries to connect, even though the IP addresses change every day, it will block it. So you're not saying I'm allowing 192.168. You're saying I'm allowing Danny's and Rob's computers. And every day I get a new IP address and it opens up those ports dynamically. So that is really valuable to secure your network. But also from the internet side, it offers similar benefits. Of course, if you've got servers, you've probably got a perimeter firewall and you're opening up a port and you're passing it straight through. So let's just say I have a CRM system. I need my users to be able to access my CRM system or a remote desktop gateway or whatever it may be. And I don't want them. So I go onto my firewall and I open up my port 443 for my CRM. I have dual factor. I feel comfortable, but dual factor doesn't help when there's a vulnerability. So what you can do with network control is you can then say on the endpoint, I'm going to open 443 up, or on the server, not the endpoint, sorry, the server, the CRM server, but I'm only going to allow this group of users, and it will track their public IP addresses and close the port at the server level. So even though it's open on the firewall, it's closed at the server firewall, so it can't get to it. And that's really, really useful in hardening your environment.
I think the point is, don't trust the LAN. Don't trust the local network. And fundamentally, for many, many years, depending on perimeter protection was pretty much the approach. But the fact is, you can't depend on perimeter detection. I mean, the perimeter is gone anyway, with people working from God knows where. But I heard a great story recently about, and I've used an example of my network at home and all the different devices that are on it, and along with my work computer and my cameras and my security things and my heating systems, my oven. And the one thing I tell people is, like, I have never patched my oven, but it's sitting on the same network at home. But I told that story to somebody. I made that joke to somebody. They told me about a situation where an attack had been initiated via a smart heater in a fish tank. Right, incoming connections.
You could say you were fished.
A smart heater in a fish tank. And like, there's so many different devices on networks these days. There's so many IoT devices. I mean, half of them made in more than half of them probably made in China, but there's so many different devices on network nowadays. The thing about the difference between your traditional firewall, we're doing it, number one, we're doing it at the endpoint level, but as you said, whether a port is open or not depends on what's connecting to it. So if it's a machine that's running ThreatLocker in the group you specify, it's going to be allowed to connect, whether an IP address changes or it's here or there, at home or in Starbucks. But whether that port is open or not depends on what's connecting to it. And that it's akin to network segmentation, but it's done at the endpoint rather than at the firewall.
Someone said a question here, and I'm not sure if they're misunderstanding it. I have noticed the latest update ThreatLocker allows you to run anything using admin accounts. Nothing's changed. You can't run software if it's not on the whitelist, whether you are an admin or not, with ThreatLocker. So if someone's got a policy that says this user can run anything they want, and it says especially good when having network problems and not able to talk to ThreatLocker, but it defeats the purpose. You can't run software whether you're an admin or not as ThreatLocker. If you're having that, there's something wrong with the configuration, so you probably should just come into support, speak to your cyber hero, your solution engineer, and ask them why you can't, because there's something in your policies that's allowed to do that. And then it's followed by another question by a different user. What's the main logic behind an override code? An override code should never be used. The only reason to ever use an override code is if you need to install something. Well, I guess there's two possible reasons. One is if you need to install something and you have no network access. So you're in an emergency, maybe you need to install a new network driver to get network access. It's highly unlikely on a modern computer that you need to do that. But let's just assume you do. You say, I need to download and install my new network driver in order to get onto the network. That's a case where the override codes, which are changed every day, can be used for that device. So that's one way. The other reason is ThreatLocker is not available. I mean, touch wood, we haven't had any data center problems since 2020. I mean, we get some slowdowns now and again, but nothing will stop it being available. And even in 2020, it was just really slow. If you can't connect to ThreatLocker and you need to put something in, those override codes make it useful for you to do that. Someone's asked, if I install software as a user on a user's PC with domain admin creds, who are those creds cached anywhere on the PC? No. So if you enter your domain admin credentials on a computer, I'm assuming this is not related to ThreatLocker, but in general, those credentials are cached in the NTLM database, but only in a hashed format, which now allows an attacker to do a password attack.
Which is pretty much what Mimikatz depends on, if I'm not much mistaken.
Yes. The other thing is if they've got a keylogger, they're now unencrypted. Now, what I would recommend is when you want to install software with ThreatLocker, you allow, rather than putting your creds in, you say this program can run as an admin temporarily, and ThreatLocker will take care of it without entering creds on the computer. We can also do automatic password rotation every day for your local admin account, so you don't have to worry about those passwords being compromised. Someone's asked how long the hash is there. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it actually gets removed from the database. How long is the hash in the NTLM database for?
No idea.
I don't think it goes away because it's certainly not short term, because if you take your laptop offline and you log in 2 months later without having internet connection, you can still log in. So I don't know if it goes away until it's changed. Okay, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to answer one more question.
Ian has just answered that question, which is indefinite.
Yes, I would tend to agree with that, but I'm not backing it up with scientific knowledge, just my gut feeling of it.
An educated guess.
Yeah. What are the potential issues associated with having multiple policies that are the same restrictions at different security layers, such as a perimeter firewall, EDR, antivirus agents, ThreatLocker, and etc.? So, and EDR isn't so firewall, perimeter, and ThreatLocker, you have two different policies. They're two independent things. We're talking about network policies here, not software policies. So when you have a perimeter firewall, you can open up a port. You get less options with a perimeter firewall than you do at the endpoint because you're running less. You don't know what software is running. You don't have all the conditions. That's pretty normal practice. It's been practiced for a long time. The complication is you make sure you got to open both ports if you're trying to access something publicly. If you're trying to access something privately, you only have to enter it at the endpoint.
Elaborate a little bit though, Danny. The end of the question, I think, is a good one, which he said, how can these policies be effectively coordinated to ensure layered security without conflicts or redundancy? What is your view on this? Should we disable everything and rely on ThreatLocker alone, or the more the merrier?
No, now, you should, well, we'll talk about the firewall first. You should not disable, you should have a perimeter firewall. Don't rely on it. But it's kind of like having a gate on your yard. You know, my back door is locked and my gate is locked. but if I don't say, well, I'm not locking my back door because I got a gate, and I don't say I'm not locking my gate because I got the back door locked. It's both of them are valid. The gate tends to be, hey, I'm going to keep the bulk of people from walking around my yard, whereas the back door is actually going to stop someone breaking in. Well, I wouldn't count on it, but it should do. And I would say ThreatLocker is the closer you are, the better security you always have. But putting perimeter security is not a bad thing.
The other the other question here, I think, hidden away, is about the protections that we offer, which are effectively controls, and also layering that with the likes of EDRs and antivirus agents, etc. Now, my personal opinion, I'm never going to tell somebody they need less security. Okay. But I would argue that a well-balanced security posture, or a well-balanced security stack, should contain elements of what we offer, which is control, and also what detection offers. So a well-balanced stack should have some of both. I mean, the beauty about it is we do what we do and they do what they do. We don't get in each other's way. There should be no conflicts. There should be no redundancy, because fundamentally we're fighting the same fight, but we're not really approaching it from the same direction. So my opinion is that you should have both in play.
Both some kind of detection and some kind of control. Correct. I think where the question, and I think a better question to answer is, okay, I've got X budget. What are the most important things for me to do? Do I want to block everything, or do I want to only try and block bad stuff? And in that case, I'm always going to say block everything and forget that I'm going to try and block bad stuff. And of course, you've always got Windows Defender to back you up on that. And if you said to me, I'm using ThreatLocker, I've got ThreatLocker lockdown, I've got it secured, I've got ring fence, I've got allow listing, and maybe I've got ops in there as well, which does the whole indicators of compromise of the EDR would do. Well, I've got another $10,000 to spend on my budget. Where do you think I should spend it? Should I buy an EDR or should I buy something else? Now, obviously, I'd have to look at your environment, but I would be more inclined to say we should buy pen testers. Because so the question often becomes around budget. The other area the question comes around is footprints. Now, ThreatLocker has a very small footprint on the endpoint compared to an EDR. If I have a roller coaster or a ATM machine or an old computer and I want to keep the footprint down, then it's like, should I get both? And this isn't a case about need. It's a case about more is better, to the point where it doesn't slow down your machine. Now, I think we're running out of time, Rob, so I want to get the questions. We got a couple of giveaways again. So again, Zero Trust World, Orlando, Florida. If you haven't already signed up, I really do recommend it. And I'm not just saying that, it's our conference. It is very, very hands-on focus. We've got how many days? 3 days in Orlando, Florida. It's lovely weather in February here in Orlando. It's the only time it's lovely weather, but it's lovely weather. It's 70 degrees or 20 degrees if you're flying over from Ireland, Celsius. Sunny, blue skies, but more importantly, we have labs. We teach you how to secure Windows, how to secure Office 365, how to secure Windows servers. We have some great speakers. We have Mark Robo coming in, the glitter bomb expert, the NASA engineer coming in as well. We got some other cool speakers, the people hacker. We teach you how to hack, not because we want you to hack, but because we want you to know how to defend. So we've got classes with rubber duckies. We'll show you how to program them. We've got Wi-Fi pineapple classes that Rob's going to get embarrassed over because it's all going to go well. Maybe we'll get Seamus to do it next year, Rob. We've got Metasploit classes, we got Capture the Flag, and we're really trying to teach you the risks of security. And the hope is you walk away and you say, these are the things that I need to put in place to make my environment secure. The more people we can secure, the better. The tickets are normally $499. I think we have $200 off. There's a coupon code going to be put in the chat. I think, is there anything else we want to finish out on?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered pretty much everything. One thing, and it's a much bigger subject, and we probably want to do a different webinar on it, but just have some sort of an incident response plan in place. Have some sort of plan as to what you're going to do if the worst does happen. Ideally, don't store it somewhere that might get encrypted. I have heard horror stories of people who have had incident response plans and they've been asked to produce them in the case of an incident and have not been able to.
Print it, put it in your safe, and it's really important. On that, if anything happens during the weekend, whether you are a ThreatLocker partner or not, whether you are secured or not, we are here to help you respond. We're not you don't call us and say, I'm in trouble. We're going to go, okay, give me your credit card number. You can call us. We have 24-hour support. We are available within 60 seconds. The guys pick up the phone. It doesn't matter whether it's 2 a.m. on Christmas morning or in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. If you are in trouble and you need some kind of help, we will do everything we can to help you. And that may be, hey, let's just get an agent out and get it locked down, and find out what's going on and get you logged so you're better prepared and less damage is done. But we are here 24 hours a day. We pick up within 30 seconds, 60 seconds, our guarantee. You can call our 1-800 number on our website, or you can go into chat from the Cyber Hero. Of course, we want you to be locked down before the weekend. We prefer you don't get hit. So if you can, and you are an existing ThreatLocker partner, get onto your engineer and make sure all of your computers are secured, because that's going to hopefully mean you don't have to incident response plan. But we are here, whether you're a partner, whether you're a customer or not. These guys do this all day long, where people call them up and they say, we got screwed. We had RDP open on the internet. We weren't using any security software that we should have been. We didn't have anything locked down. We're not even a ThreatLocker customer. Can you help us? And they will help you as much as they possibly can. And one with obviously getting you software, getting you tools, helping you find the threats in your environment, and they don't charge you for that. The other one is introducing you we've got a number of incident response partners that work with ThreatLocker who can get out really, really quick and sometimes help do recovery if it means putting physical bodies on the ground. Of course, we never want it to come to that.
Very nice comment from Johnny. Not a question, but a comment. ThreatLocker's support is world-class. Absolutely have the best time interacting with them. Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. Very kind.
Okay. Well, Rob, thank you. Everyone, thank you for in joining us today. And I don't know if we have another one before Thanksgiving, but if not, enjoy your holidays and stay safe.
That's my next question about when Thanksgiving is, when it actually is, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you.